Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat Parashat class, Parashat Vayigash, the traits of a great leader. The Parashat opens with one of the dramatic scenes and dialogues that exist in our Torah Kedusha, with Yehuda pleading on behalf of his brother Binyamin to the then leader of Viceroy of Misraim, that Yosef HaSadiq, unbeknownst to him that it's his brother Yosef. And he goes through with a very long, actually, monologue at first, not dialogue, and a powerful presentation. Within this presentation, we could find the traits of what is already not just a blooming, but almost a full-fledged leader, and get indications from that in terms of his descendants who will be the kings, future kings of Israel, what leadership qualities and traits really are. So the first thing we have to do is preface what this parasha with the storyline of Yehuda. And we know that in Parashat Vayigash, Yehuda went through quite the contrary, wherein after his terrible failure, as explained by the commentaries, in a moment where he could have saved Yosef, in a moment where he could have demonstrated leadership, at a time that he could have stepped up to the plate and said, this is not the right thing to do. We're saving this young man, like Reuven attempted to do. Instead, he bailed and he said, let's sell him. In essence, and Mefarshim say this, Yehuda is, at least logistically speaking, a direct blame for the first exile to Egypt, as he is the one that triggered all of the events which followed the sale of Yosef and all the suffering that ensued by Yosef and Yaakov and all of the other peripheral events. And because of that, at the time in Vayeshev, it says, Vayered Yehuda me'tehav, he descended, he went somewhere else, he isolated himself, he separated himself from the group. He pretty much created his own self-contained, isolated life. He wanted to be a pariah. He was escaping from himself and from his own folly. And Yehuda established himself elsewhere with a wife and a children and a livelihood, because he was ashamed of himself. He could not face what terrible misjudgment that he perpetrated, and couldn't live with his surroundings anymore. Yehuda, we see, somehow, because of his natural leadership qualities, built himself up in his new home. And we know this because later on in that story, when Tamar had duped him into being with her, and then a report was sent to Yehuda from the people of the town saying that your former daughter-in-law has had inappropriate relationships, and he said, take her and she will get a death penalty. Who in the world is Yehuda to say such a thing? Most obviously, he was already up in the ranks of leadership, maybe the mayor or the governor of the place in which he dwelled, displaying his natural leadership qualities coming out. Later, when he rejoined the family in last week's Parashat Miches, we see him being the figure after Yaakov turned Reuben down and saying, hey, kill my two sons. If I don't bring Binyamin back, give him to me. And flat out rejection by Yaakov Avinu, as opposed to Yehuda some months later, when Yaakov said, we're starving, get us some sustenance from Egypt. And Yehuda said, unless you send our child, your child, you can't go. And Yaakov complained, and finally Yehuda said, listen, put him he's on my watch, he's my responsibility. Put it on me. I guarantee you, I will take full responsibility. I'm accountable for anything that happens to him. And he listened. And at the end of last week's parasha, after the ploy of Yosef to plant that cup in the bag of Binyamin, and it was a setup, and he found them, and they checked the bags and they ripped their clothes and said, hey, what happened to us? It's Yehuda that spoke up. All of a sudden, He is speaking for and standing for the brothers. It says at the end of Parashat Mikhes, in that incident, Vayabo Yehuda ve'echav beta Yosef. Yehuda and his brothers returned to the house of Yosef. It's no longer the brothers. It's Yehuda, the leader, and the brothers. And then a few Pesukim later, he was the one that took the mantle of leadership. He was the spokesman. He was speaking on their behalf. It was no longer even a question. He was the default leader of the young fledgling nation called Bnei Israel. It was Yehuda. So all that is a preface to this parasha. And therefore, it should not come as a surprise that this natural blooming leader is the one that began this monologue, Vayigash elav Yehuda. So at this point in time, Yehuda, it's no longer a question whether he is the leader or not. It's just a matter of showing us, demonstrating what it means to be a leader. In other words, up till now, what we've seen is the facts that Yehuda, his natural leadership skills, he rose to the top. He was accepted as the default family leader, but there was no exhibition of what made him a leader. Why? What were the traits? What are the qualities that he exhibited? And it is in this very speech that we begin to get the insights as to what Yehuda is made of. And that really extends to be the paradigm of what leadership is, because Yehuda is the father of all future kings, the royalty of Am Yisrael, the leaders, including David HaMelech, including their descendants, including the future Melech HaMashiach. He is leadership. So let's try to glean just a few lessons. It won't be an exhaustive analysis of this presentation of Yehuda because it's lengthy, deep, and there are many lessons that one can extract from this presentation, but just a few points of leadership. So first of all, Parashat begins right in the outset. This is Vayigash, chapter 44, Mem Dalet, and Bereshit, Pasuk Yud Het. Vayigash elav Yehuda. There's a lot to be said about the word Vayigash, which we won't enter into right now. Vayomer bi Adoni. Now, if you look at the Aramaic, it says Beba'uri Boni. Bi Adoni, simply translated, is please. It's more of just please. It's somewhat of a plea. It's a begging. It's a supplication. It's a strong term. Bi Adoni. Allow me to speak. There is another way to look at the word be. Be also means within me. Be, it's because of me. And in a wonderful insight, the Kli HaKad explains that what Yehuda was answering a question at the same time that he was presenting an idea. What? Who are you? Is Yosef, or maybe Yosef, thinking, or whoever the leader of the land would be. Why is this the person stepping up? Why are you speaking on behalf of these people? Why is the burden now resting on your shoulders? And the answer is exactly that. Yehuda exclaimed at this moment in the beginning of his great presentation, Bi Adoni. This is all because of me. Full accountability is what leadership needs to do. Leadership needs to be honest, confident enough to be accountable, be held accountable, not only for his even minor infractions, but also on behalf of the people, to take one for the team. And Yehuda is, in one word, reflecting on his own history and climb from the depths to the top. Bi Adoni. This is me. I'm the one who perpetrated this entire saga. I'm the one who caused the sale. My lack of leadership, my lack of strength and confidence, my lack of boldness made me, and when I was on stage, not be able to say and do the right thing. Instead, I suggested sale to slavery. Bi Adoni. You have to know that all of this is because of me, And what I did, therefore, is take full responsibility for my actions. And the Kli Yakar says, wait a second. Rashi, a little bit later, in the Pasuk where Yehuda reflects on the deal he made with Yaakov, way at the end, really, of the speech. And he said, Ki abdecha ara b'tanah. Because I, your servant, he's telling Yosef, I've guaranteed, right? Remember those words last week's Parashat, Anuchi e'ed benu. What does that mean? It's a guarantor, an arev kablan, in business monetary terms, is a guarantor. It's a person that signs personal, right? It's the person that is guaranteeing that this will happen. And he says here, Abdecha Arabatana, and on that Rashi says, oh, he's trying to explain why I'm the spokesperson, because I took it upon myself. Says the Kli Yakar, yeah, but that is why he took it upon himself. Why is it that Yehuda went up to Yaakov and said, I will take full responsibility? The reason is because of Bi Adoni. Because all along, it was my issue. It was my problem. I'm taking full responsibility. He didn't tell his father what happened in the beginning. But the reason behind him approaching Yaakov with this acceptance of responsibility, I'm the guarantor, is because a good leader understands that he's not to hide behind his flaws. He's to man up to his flaws. And so the Bi Adoni, this is because of me, and I'm accountable for all of it, is what motivated him to say, that I became the guarantor because of the fact that I'm being accountable for my own actions. First lesson of a leader is full accountability. Don't run. You are first in line to not only be accountable for your own actions, but to be the one that stands protecting the rest of the team and being willing to take the hit. Next lesson. We go through this entire speech. It's so interesting. We know that he is reflecting upon what Yosef, for the most part, already knows. Why is he doing that? He says, he actually reflects upon their previous dialogue. And I'll just quickly paraphrase without reading, going through the Pesukim started from Yoted. You, my master, asked, do you have any brothers? And I said, we have an older father and a younger brother. We left him at home with dad. You said, bring him to me. And let me look at him. But Norman and I said, he can't leave his father. You said, well, if he doesn't leave, and he doesn't come over here, then you'll never be able to see me again. I won't allow you back. Okay, so what I did, why did I have to remind him of that conversation? Yosef knew of that conversation. And then he continues, and he said, I went back to my father, and my father said, well, go get us some food. And he said, I'm sorry, we can't without your younger son, Binyamin. And then my father began to explain to me, I had my main wife had 2 children. One left. I think he was devoured. I'm not sure. I haven't seen him. This one, if something happens, you take it from me, and I'll go to the grave in great depression. And now he tells Yosef, when I come back to my father and his soul is tied to his son's soul, and I return and he doesn't see the young boy there anymore, that's it. He's going to the grave in the worst possible way. And then he says, because I took full responsibility. Well, all this reflection, what is all this detail? So Yosef, in another demonstration of an incredible quality, really was very perceptive. The Ramban explains that he picked up, not Yosef, Yehuda rather. Yehuda was very perceptive. The Ramban explains that he picked up on a few things that Yosef mentioned in last week's Parashat. Do you remember when he first imprisoned Shimon? He came back and he took them out of prison. And he said, here's the deal. And he said, don't worry. Yosef almost slipped. Don't worry, I fear God. I don't know if the rest of the boys even paid attention to this guy. What is he talking about? When have you heard that of the amount of an Egyptian leader? Don't worry, I fear God. It's sort of like they were in such despair. It was such a time of high stress. They glossed over it. Yehuda registered it. Yehuda also registered the kindness of Yosef and the people in the household, um, the generous treatment of them, the respect that he demonstrated. All that was registered. And so he perceived that this is the person I could appeal to. I could appeal to his emotion, to his sensitivities. And therefore, he replayed their conversation. And then Yaakov's was almost like a slow motion recall of Yaakov's conversation. All he had to say is that my father said he can't go. Instead, he went sentence by sentence. He dramatized it. He spoke about the father reflecting upon his wife who passed away and the two boys and one boy disappearing. And all of that was to play into the sensitivities and the emotion of Yosef. There's a midrash that says that all of the presentation of Yehuda was a piyus li Yosef, which means an appeasement to Yosef, a piyus le'ehav, an appeasement to his brothers, piyus le'Binyamin, an appeasement to Binyamin. And it goes on to explain that it was an appeasement to Yosef to show this person who we didn't know was Yosef. But look how these people are sensitive and compassionate to their brother. An appeasement to the brothers, showing them, look how much I care about Binyamin. And an appeasement to Binyamin, saying, look how much your brothers care about you. Yehuda was able, in his presentation, to simultaneously, he was doing multitasking here, accomplish a lot. And one of it was with his words, sensitive words, and his perception of Yosef, who he was, and everyone else's emotions, say things that projected subliminal messages, very subliminal messages that really registered with who he thought was the leader of the land, but even who was Yosef underneath. Subliminal messages to his own brothers, throwing out these facts of emotion in his presentation. And then finally, there's something so interesting. There's another midrash that says that Yehuda, on the other hand, was quite challenging in some of his terminology. I'm going to preface it by pointing out to you that he was very direct. He told him, Adoni Sha'al, you asked me this question. But Tomed, you said, Horiduhu. You said, bring him down. I said, I can't. You said, if he doesn't come down. That was almost like an accusatory terminology he's using. And in fact, the Midrash says that in the beginning, the point of Yehuda was, Bata alenu ba'alila, that you're the one who accused us. How many people, says the Midrash, that Yehuda conveyed to Yosef, did you ask when they came to buy food? Give me some collateral. Bring me your son, bring me your brother. Do you ask that to everyone that comes? Really, I look at this as a conspiracy. The Midrash is saying that Yehuda was conveying to Yosef. And because of that, that was the undertone over here. There was a blame being placed. And in fact, there's another Midrash that says, the Esima ani alai, you said bring him here and I'll look at him. Meaning, I'll supervise him. I'll oversee. I mean, don't worry about it. Is this what you call don't worry about it, Mr. Leader of the land? You said, you mentioned. He's pointing fingers at the same time. So simultaneous to perceiving his sensitivity and compassion and playing on emotions, he's also being very direct, bold. Simply put, a leader does not skirt the truth. A leader wisely, but will say what needs to be said, not fearing consequences, being bold enough to state what is right and what is just. And that's exactly what Yehuda was doing in his speech. While he was being clever, he was playing on Yosef's sensitivity. At the same time, he was directly challenging this leader and saying, I'm sorry, but what's right is what's right. And I have to say it straight out to you, Mr. Leader. Let's call a spade a spade. Amazing. In this well thought out, thorough presentation, we see the traits, the great qualities of Yehuda being exhibited, the leadership being demonstrated, of his being self-accountable, of his being very perceptive, and more than anything else, standing for the truth. Yehuda did become the future father of all Jewish leaders. But Jewish leaders can't just be born into leadership. They have to act like leaders. And with this speech that ended up breaking through and having Yosef's great public admission, Yehuda demonstrated to us that he indeed was deserving at the time and for all his future descendants and being the leader and future leader of Am Yisrael. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.